Welcome, Hoosier Nation, to the second edition of Josh and Mai's weekly Big Ten Roundup show. I'm Michael. That's Josh on the other end. Josh, good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Let's hit the ground running again. I'm excited.
All right, let's do it. So we saw two wins for the Hoosiers last time around against two very subpar opponents. Both wins we saw coming. I'm sure most people did as well. But this week brings a little more of a challenge. You know, we got Northwestern this Saturday at home, and then we travel to Wisconsin in the Kohl Center to take on the Badgers. Those will be two tough matchups, and nothing's going to be given in both of those. Let's start out with Northwestern. This is a team that doesn't really have too much of an identity. We know they're a defensive team, and their focus is on defense, but they don't have that kind of reputation that most teams do in the Big Ten, like, you know, the Wisconsins and the Michigan States and stuff like that. They're a tough team to play against regardless, but they don't have that identity. And the only thing you really know about them is that they're going to play tight defense. And this is a team that likes to space you out, and they set a lot of screens on offense. So, you know, for the Hoosiers, they need to find ways to score because defensively, Northwestern's going to spread them out a lot. And they're going to put their guards on their forwards, and they're going to pressure you up top, and they're going to take away the dribble drive. But they're good about getting around screens, and they play lockdown defense on ball. So you're not going to get a lot of opportunities to drive to the hoop. You're going to have to get open by cutting and setting off-ball screens. So my first key for this matchup for Indiana is just to find ways to score. This is, believe it or not, Northwestern might be the best defensive team that the Hoosiers have seen all season. Statistically, that's the case, but you know, you got to factor in out-of-conference opponents and whatnot. But this is a very good defensive team nonetheless. Like I said, they space you out, and they force a lot of turnovers. Look at what they did against Maryland the other night. Held them to fewer than 50 points, in regulation because they forced a bunch of turnovers. And that's how Northwestern stays in games, is they space you out, you have to take your time and create a shot, and they force turnovers. You know, if Indiana can continue to get off to a quick start offensively and dominate the transition portion of the game, they'll be able to keep a lead and win this game in the end. But Northwestern's defense can get inside your head, and they can frustrate you to the point of almost no return, and that's exactly what happened against Maryland. And Indiana's got to have these stone-cold minds, stay focused, find ways to score, and continue to play their game. They got to make smart passes, knock down the open looks when they get them, because they may not come as often as they would like.
Yeah, I mean, those are all solid points. I mean, this is a solid Northwestern team that's going to come into Assembly Hall. They just put Maryland. They just went to overtime at Maryland. Now they're coming on a short week to Indiana. Those are two tough places to play right in a row. But my key to this one is going to be you cannot let them hang around. I mean, you saw what they did at Maryland, and they're a good defensive team. If they need to get a stop on defense, more than likely they will be able to get that stop on defense, even against Indiana and their shooting ability. This Northwestern team is no joke on defense. He was just talking about it, and it's if Indiana, they've been really good at home shooting the basketball, so that hopefully shouldn't be an issue. But if they do run into trouble like they did against Wisconsin at home, not even scoring 60 points in that game, they're going to have to rely on their defense. And who knows, we could see a defensive battle in this one. And going into overtime, it was 48-48 the other day at Maryland. So you know they can hunker down on defense and get a stop if needed. But if Northwestern's hanging around in this game for I don't know, 37 minutes, that last 3-minute stretch is going to be key. See if the Hoosiers can get a couple key baskets and get some stops on defense. I think their defense is going to be tested in this game because of how good Northwestern is on defense. And if you let them hang around, that's where trouble can kind of creep in, and a little bit of doubt could surface over the Assembly Hall crowd. Hopefully we don't see that. And hopefully we see another performance like we did against Illinois and Ohio State. But with the defense this team plays, you're going to need to bring your A game on offense for sure.
All solid points. And when you have a matchup like this, if Indiana's, you know, creeping at the 3-minute warning, 4 minutes left in the game, and they've got less than 60 points, Hoosier fans are going to panic because that's not a familiar sight. But that very well may be the case. But we're urging you, worry not until the final buzzer. But how Northwestern's going to stay in this game is through their ball movement on offense, specifically through Alex Ola, who is their 7-foot center, 4-year starter for the Wildcats. He's going to be a tall task for Bryant, no pun intended. Northwestern likes to pass the ball around the perimeter and through Ola. So Bryant McIntosh is their point guard, and this guy, he's a very solid player. He likes to dribble drive. He likes to kick it out to the wings. He likes to feed it down low, and he can get to the hoop almost at will. So there are going to be those two guys along with the sharpshooter Trey Demps, who is very shifty, very quick. Robert Johnson or Yogi Ferrell, whoever decides to line up against him, is going to be in for a long game defensively because this guy doesn't stop running. And he's got, step into the gym range. So Northwestern's going to move the ball through those three guys mostly and look for open looks between them. And Alex Ola can back a guy down. I mean, he's a big 7-footer. He's tall, obviously. He's 7 feet, just like Thomas Bryant. But he is a big, thick guy. And Thomas Bryant is maybe out physical this game. No idea yet, but he just may be. And that could pose a problem if Ola has his way with Bryant. Now, if Bryant brings the energy, they're going to have to force Northwestern to make jump shots, which they can do, but not at an elite level. So that may be to their advantage. So Thomas Bryant needs to step up and contain Ola if they want to win this game. But they also need to lock down around the perimeter because Northwestern hits open shots and they get a lot of open looks. They set a ton of off-ball screens. They've got a couple of good shooters, and they like to dribble and kick it back out. And they also like to kick it out from the post. If Alex Ola draws the double team, he likes to kick it back out to the corners and the wings for an open three. So they can hit you. They can beat you both ways and hit you with open shots, and they can get to the hoop. So they're not a very dynamic offensive team, but they do have their moments, and they can shine, and they have what it takes to get it done. So it's going to take 40 minutes of sheer focus from Indiana defensively if they want to stay in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this could be just one of those grinded-out games like it was against against Wisconsin a couple weeks ago, where the offense may not be clicking on all cylinders, but you still find a way to get it done. That's kind of how this Indiana team has gone this season when they're not blowing teams out. But, I mean, at Minnesota, Wisconsin, they grinded that game out against St. John's, even though it was so long ago back in Maui. They just find ways to win, and when it comes down to it, getting a win in the win column is really all that matters. And speaking of getting a win, Ken Pom, who is great, I think his stats are awesome. 82% chance of winning against Northwestern, 9-point win. He predicts 75-66 against a solid Northwestern team, ranked 66 overall in the Ken Pom ranking. So that's nothing to bat your eye at right there. This is a solid team coming in to Assembly Hall. Illinois was I believe in the 90s when they came in to Assembly Hall, and you saw what they did the other night. So this could be an interesting game for the Hoosiers. Could be a game on. It's going to be a defensive battle. I feel like, and hopefully they can get that win and then carry some momentum into Madison on Tuesday, which is where Indiana will face off against the Badgers. 62 in Ken Pom, and Madison's a tough place to play. I mean, you saw Michigan State. They're on a 3-game losing streak. They just lost there on Sunday, so it's not an easy place to play. Indiana's had their troubles there in the past. Last season did not go well for them. I believe that was a 20-point loss, if I'm thinking correctly there. And there's 2 players coming back from their national runner-up last season, Nigel Hayes and Bronson Koenig. I mean, these are 2 dynamic players. And my first key to this one is you cannot let Nigel Hayes beat you. He averages 16.3 points per game. They only average around 70 points. So kind of limiting him and having him settle for shots. He only shoots 39% from the floor. We saw last time out he did not have a big game against Indiana, and they only won by 1. So if Nigel Hayes gets going, that could be an interesting dilemma there of what happens with Nigel Hayes. But if you let him settle for jumpers, I think Indiana could be in a good spot to get a win in that one.
All very good points. And my key for this one, it's one word and it's very simple: score. Because Wisconsin, just like Northwestern, is going to lock you down defensively. And this is a great, for 5-6 days for the Hoosiers to have Northwestern and then Wisconsin, because these are 2 teams that play great defense. They don't score very often, but they play great defense. And it's almost a complete opposite view of what we see from Indiana. They're a team that can score at will, and they lack defensively at some parts of the game. But this is a complete opposite team in Wisconsin and Northwestern for what it's worth. And depending on how that Northwestern game goes, they'll make the necessary adjustments. But this is going to be a fantastic test, these 2 games, especially with Wisconsin being on the road. That's a heck of an environment for the Hoosiers. And they need to score in both these games, but Wisconsin especially, because they have more weapons. And they just didn't play well offensively last time they played Wisconsin. 59 points, like you mentioned, sub 60. Given that that was their first game without James Blackman Jr., and they needed to learn to find other ways to score without him. But this game's on the road, so it's not going to be any easier. In fact, it just may be harder, and you need to score early and often when you're going on the road as the favorite. They're on a roll offensively lately. They scored 100 against Illinois. They've got to keep this up, get everyone involved, distribute the ball. Wisconsin is much less talented across the board than Indiana, so almost anyone on the court can score points, not at will, but everyone on the court is capable of making a play for Indiana almost at all times. So they got to score here, and they just need to completely wipe that first performance offensively out of their minds, but defensively keep it right there. But on the offensive side of the ball, the last time they played Wisconsin, it wasn't pretty, and they needed to keep that up and change things this time around.
Yeah, I mean, going off of your point of scoring the basketball, my last point is just play your game on the road, and I think that's Indiana's game, is scoring the basketball. You know, they're a really good offensive team, and if you let Wisconsin hang around, I mean, this is a game you're expected to win, especially when you're 6-0 in the Big Ten. You're hoping for bigger and better things this season. If you let Wisconsin hang around, like I actually expect them to hang around, but it's just it's that bucket at the end. Who can you get the ball to get a bucket when you absolutely need it? Can you get a stop on defense when you absolutely need it? These are all things that come into play on the road, and we kind of saw it at Minnesota the other day where things weren't clicking, but you brought in Nick Zeisloft off the bench. He hits 5 threes in that game. If he doesn't hit those threes, I don't think Indiana comes out of there with a win. But you just need to play your game on the road, and just like you were saying, you got to score the basketball. That's Indiana's game. That's how they're going to win games for the rest of the season. And if they continue to score at the rate they're scoring, over 100 points against Illinois, I don't think that'll happen in these next 2 games, but it could. But if you score the basketball, these other teams are not going to be able to keep up with you. In Wisconsin, Northwestern, not necessarily the best offensive teams, but if Indiana can bring their defense like they've been playing and bring their offense on the road, you could be seeing a nice little 8-0 start here to the Big Ten season for Indiana. I think that's very realistic at this point as well.
I agree with you right there. And those are all solid points. And you know, like I said, 2 great defensive teams, and they're going to have to bring it offensively and defensively in both of them. And it's going to be very interesting to see. And this 2-game stretch is probably their biggest and toughest 2-game stretch that we've seen so far this season, just because of the caliber of the 2 teams' defenses. Both top 40 in the nation in terms of scoring defense. Obviously, it's going to be a tough task. And 2 very well-coached teams. So, yeah. Sorry, keep going.
I mean, Ken Palm only gives Indiana a 54% chance of winning this game. They have Indiana winning 70-69, so he thinks it's going to be a good game throughout. I expect it to be a big game throughout because when you go into the Kohl Center in Madison, I mean, it's cold outside. You just want to get in there, get out of there. It's not a very friendly place to play. Although those Wisconsin high school new rules, you can't say air ball. I don't think that applies to the college game. But it's not a very good place to play. If you're coming in on the road, you saw Michigan State lose there. Indiana hasn't played well there in the past. So getting in there, doing what you need to do, playing your game on the road, that's what's got to happen.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point with those Ken Palm rankings. Those are great. We got to refer to those more often. So nice job there. But I just want to warn our viewers that what did he say the score would be for Northwestern? 75-66? I'm going to go out on a limb and say prepare yourselves for that to not be the final score. It's going to be 60-something to 50-something or 90-something to 60-something. It will not be 70-something to 60-something. And I don't think it'll be that for Madison either. I think that the Hoosiers will come out with a bigger win than we expect because they're just on such a roll right now. But we'll get to that in just a second. Right now, we've got to do our pick to click. And I'll start us off for Northwestern. I've got the guards because Northwestern's 2 biggest scoring options are Bryant McIntosh and Trey Demps, both small guards. And Tom Crean is very open about his love for Trey Demps. He actually voted for him last year, the only guy to do this, to put him on the first team All Big Ten, which was a shock to anyone that knows Northwestern basketball. This guy can't be an All Big Ten guard, but Tom Crean thinks so because of what he did a couple years ago. Northwestern came into Assembly Hall, were down the entire game, and Trey Demps just got hot and took over that game and single-handedly brought into a comeback. So that was the last time they traveled to Assembly Hall. This time the Hoosiers are looking for something different. Like I said, this guy's got step into the gym range. Bryant McIntosh can dribble the entire shot clock and find a shot with 1 second left. So I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if Crean puts Yogi Ferrell on Trey Demps to match quickness on quickness and Robert Johnson on Bryant McIntosh to kind of lock him down, prevent him from dribble driving and finding someone down low. So it's going to be very interesting to watch those two guys go at it from each side. A nice 2-on-2. That's going to be a chess match within the game, and that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I urge everyone to watch what's going on between Crean, Coach Collins, Demps McIntosh, Johnson Farrell. Going to be awesome. I think the guards really have to step up defensively and offensively. But those are going to be some great matchups right there. I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, this game seems to be full of good matchups, and you were talking about Alex Ola. I think my pick to click in this game is going to be Thomas Bryant. I think he's going to take this challenge to heart. You've seen his intensity all year long when he throws down a huge dunk, when he has a huge block, even when he commits a foul, he doesn't think he committed. He's always intense, and I think he's going to bring that intensity. He's going to kind of bring it down a little bit, and he's going to let it show out in his play, because I think he's going to have a big game against Alex Ola. He's probably could be one of the best big men he's faced so far in the Big Ten throughout this season, and I think he is due for a big game. He's had a couple. I wouldn't say he's kind of leveled out, but he struggled to get it going since he had his double-double a couple games ago. I think this is going to be a big game for Thomas Bryant. Alex Ola is a good 7-footer for Northwestern, and Thomas Bryant could be an interesting player to watch in this game. And then now moving to Wisconsin, this is obviously, we've talked about it. It's going to be a tough place to play, and this game could come down to just 1 or 2 plays at the end, which is why my pick to click is OG Anunoby. I think it's going to be one play on defense. He always has that breakaway dunk one time in the game. OG Anunoby is going to come up with a big defensive play. I don't know if it'll be that or if he'll hit a shot, but he's going to make one big play in this game that will determine the outcome. And I think he's due for another big game as well. He had a good game at Minnesota. Didn't really get into the action too much against Illinois just because it was such a blowout and all the focus was Yogi Ferrell and the records and the threes and all that. But he's going to come back against Wisconsin. I think he's going to have a big game.
Yeah, good points there. And for me, Wisconsin's all about Nigel Hayes. So whoever's guarding Nigel Hayes, that's my pick to click, whether that be Troy Williams or whoever. The key has to be to stop Nigel Hayes. If he's taken out of the game, it's pretty much over. They don't have, other than Bronson Koenig, any other really proven scoring options. They average less than 70 a game, and Nigel Hayes contributes almost 70 of those points. So not quite a quarter, but right there. If you hold him to a bad night offensively, that puts you in a position to excel at what your strength is. If Nigel Hayes is not scoring enough points to keep Wisconsin ahead on the scoreboard, Indiana's strength is scoring. They're just going to score, right? You got to believe that. So they're going to find ways to score. Now, Indiana just has to worry about stopping Nigel Hayes. And I would be surprised if we saw Troy Williams match up against him to bring some physicality and whatnot. But you have to stop Nigel Hayes. He's their only proven scoring option, and Bronson Koenig can only take the Badgers so far. So I think this one's on Troy Williams or whatever forward has to guard Nigel Hayes. They've got to shut him down.
Nigel Hayes he's their guy, and if you can get guys like Zach Showalter and Ethan Happ into the game, I think that's going to be a good thing for Indiana. Those are just role players. Also, they're in the starting lineup, but they're no more than role players on that team. That team is Nigel Hayes and Bronson Koenig. And I think it'll probably be Yogi Ferrell matched up against Bronson Koenig. And in the last game, he did a pretty solid job on him. I think it'll be probably another closely contested matchup, so every basket's going to count. But it's really keeping the ball and letting Nigel Hayes and Bronson Koenig just settle for their shots. Don't let them drive on you. Don't let them get into the paint, because that's where they will do their damage. And this team isn't the best three-point shooting team. It's probably a little bit average. Indiana definitely better at shooting the three than Wisconsin, but it's Nigel Hayes and Bronson Koenig. That's pretty much what it comes down to with the Badgers this season.
Yeah, it's those two guys, and then pretty much everyone else is not really a role player, but those two guys are definitely the stars and the leaders of that team, both emotionally and talent-wise. So stop those two guys, and the game should be, within reach enough to score some points and put Wisconsin out of it. Hopefully it's not as close as last time, but they're on a roll lately, so we'll see how that goes. And that leads us right into prediction time, which is our favorite part of the show. So maybe this isn't too much of a gimme as last time. I know Hoosiers are undefeated in the Big Ten, but you've got two tougher opponents. Minnesota's not that challenging. Illinois, we saw, was not that much of a challenge for the Hoosiers. But, if you got a 15-win Northwestern team and a solid Wisconsin team on the road, you have an upset in either one of those. Let's start with Northwestern. Who do you see there?
No, I do not have an upset in that one. I think Indiana's going to take care of business. They're just too good at home. They shoot the basketball so well at Assembly Hall. Northwestern does bring a defensive dynamic to this game that will be interesting to see how the Hoosiers counter against that. But I just think it's too much. And we saw Northwestern. I was watching the game against Ohio State a couple weeks ago when they needed to hit that big shot. They couldn't really get it done. And I just think that's going to be the same story in this one on Saturday. I just think Indiana's offense is too much, too high octane for Northwestern to handle.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I know Jared is probably going to love this, but I have Indiana beating Northwestern. I said it. I'm on the record. Write it down. Remember this forever. Indiana will beat Northwestern.
This is big.
I said it. Never forget it. But I agree with you 100% in everything you said. Northwestern in the past and up to this day have been notorious for not being able to finish games. And it's a shame because they succumb so close with just about everyone in the entire country, whether it's number 1, number 25, or someone in the basement. They come close with everyone. They play to their matchup. They play well against everyone, but they can't get it done in the final minutes. And I think this game will be close in the 60s. But in the end, Northwestern they can't score enough points. They don't have enough offensive firepower, and their defense isn't quite elite, to say the least. It's good, it's solid, but it's not good enough. And I just don't think they have enough on the table. But don't discount them for a second, because this game will be close for the full 40 minutes because Coach Collins and Tom Crean go back and forth, and they've always had great matchups against each other. It will be close, but Indiana will win.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a good game. I think we were expecting that maybe with Illinois and Ohio State. Those games turned out to be blowouts, but neither of those teams are as good on defense as they are or as Northwestern is. So that should be an interesting one. And then Tuesday, I think, could be a little bit more interesting going into Madison. Who is your prediction for this one?
I like Indiana again. I mean, they already beat them once this year, and that was, very soon after they realized they'd be without James Blackman for the whole year. So they immediately had to go and find other scoring options. And since then, they've just routed Illinois. They've picked up a couple wins since then. They're on a roll, an absolute roll. And if they had their number earlier in the year, despite going on the road, guys like Robert Johnson and Zeisloft, who caught fire the other night, these guys have more experience and they know how to function. And it seems like this team is flowing perfectly well without Blackman. And Robert Johnson's playing pretty well defensively. So I think that these guys are stepping up in a great way. And I think they get it done on the road. I really do. They start 8-0, top of the Big Ten, and I think it's full steam ahead going forward from here. This could be a huge moment in the season if they can pick up both these wins. I think they do, but they've got to work for it because these two wins will not come easy.
No, this game on Tuesday scares me a little bit because, like I said, Ken Palm thinks it's going to be a 1-point Indiana win. Going to Madison's not an easy place to play, but like I said earlier, it's going to be one play that could decide this game, and I said it could be OG Anunoby, it could be anybody on the team. But I'm going to pick the Hoosiers in this one. I'm not all too confident about it, though, just because of that Michigan State game the other day. Maybe Michigan State isn't the team we all thought they were a couple weeks ago, ranked number 1, but I'm not too sure about this one. I think Indiana will pull it out just because of the role they are on, like you were mentioning. But this one's kind of scares me a little bit. But I think the Hoosiers are going to pull it out in the end. It's going to be one play, one shot, one defensive stop that'll get them this win too. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know where your lack of confidence is coming from in this one. I'm more nervous for Northwestern, even though that the Wisconsin game's in the Kohl Center, because I just think I don't know what it is, but I think that that's a trap game, and Indiana knows that's going to be considered a trap game by pretty much everyone because it's on the road and it's Wisconsin. But in the past, Indiana's had Wisconsin's number, and I think that they could go in there and win by double digits, maybe even 15 or 20 points. I'm not saying they will, but I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest, because I think that's a game that, when teams view that this game could be a trap game and they hear people saying, "Oh, it's a trap game," they come out firing and just shut everybody up. I think that's what's going to happen there. I think they just go on a roll into 8-0.
Yeah, I mean, I could also see that happening, and it could be very likely that it does. But just going to Wisconsin, and the history seems to repeat itself. And I don't know, there's just something about Wisconsin that they're always. I mean, maybe since Bo Ryan's gone, maybe that's changed. But I don't know, it's just something about Wisconsin that just kind of gets my mind going a little bit. And I don't know. Well, I guess we're going to find out on Tuesday. I mean, Indiana's on this roll right now. It doesn't look like they will be stopped anytime soon. Maybe that'll be Tuesday. Maybe that'll be Saturday. Maybe that won't be until Michigan or Iowa down the road. But these are all winnable games, and Indiana's got to go in there and do what they got to do. Bank wins now before the schedule gets tough when you see Iowa twice, Purdue, Maryland, and so on. So getting wins now is key. Getting yourself in a position for the tournament and the Big Ten tournament is very important, and you just got to keep winning games. It's just what you got to do at this point.
Yeah, and they're fortunate enough to have what I like to call the Notre Dame football schedule, where you put a lot of your softer opponents towards the beginning of the Big Ten season, and then you elevate it up to Maryland, Purdue, Iowa at the end of the year. So they've got to get these wins now and then prove themselves when it matters. But it's one game at a time. It's Big Ten. Anything can happen. You think it could be an upset next Tuesday at Madison. We're not sure, but let's talk about what we think is for sure going to be an upset. Do we have any picks this week? I know we've got a couple big matchups. We've got Maryland at Michigan State. Could there be an upset there? Because we know Sparty's going to drop. And then we've got Purdue going against, believe it or not, top 10 Iowa. Who do you have in that first one, Maryland, Michigan State in East Lansing?
I mean, Michigan State has lost the past sorry, my video went out for some reason. I don't know. Michigan State, they've lost three straight. They've had this game on their calendar, probably circled for quite a long time, and it'll be interesting to see how they come out, how that first 10 minutes is, because this is a team that, I mean, they just lost to Nebraska the other day. They lost at Wisconsin. They're in a bad spot right now. This is kind of like the opposite of Tom Izzo. Usually you get better as the season goes on. It seems like they're getting worse as the season is going or is progressing. So this will be interesting to see what happens in the start of this one. Maryland is going to hang around this entire game, but I think in the end, Denzel Valentine's really good, and I think he's going to hit a clutch shot in the last 2 minutes or so. And I think Michigan State is going to protect their home court, end the 3-game losing streak, and finally get a win.
I'd like to think that too. And, we were sitting here 8 days ago saying, oh, Denzel's coming back, the triple-double machine. Michigan State's going to turn it around, and they've lost 2 straight. What's going on? And we'd like to say that, they'll snap out of it. They're playing at home. It's a big-time matchup. Well, they just lost at home to Nebraska. They're one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. Now, look at Maryland. Maryland's on a roll. They've got Rashid Suleiman, Jake Layman, Melo Trimble. All these guys can score. Diamond Stone. I don't know how Maryland can be stopped, because they're proving that even when Melo Trimble, with the exception of that Michigan game, even when Melo Trimble gets cold, Rashid Suleiman can step up and Layman can step up, and they can even rely on freshman Diamond Stone. And they've got 4 guys that can score the ball almost at will. And if one of them is not clicking, they've got 3 guys. They've got kind of checks and balances. So I like Maryland in this one. I'm going to take them straight up. Forget the points. I'll take them straight up. Like I said, you can say that Tom Izzo is going to turn this around and Michigan State can, flip the momentum. But they haven't yet. And yes, he's a great coach. And yes, they're a talented team, but they haven't proved anything yet. They've lost some bad games, lost a couple at home. They've lost 2 since Denzel got back. And Maryland's just got too many scoring options. And they find ways to win. And it's not always pretty, but Maryland finds ways to win. And that's because they have a lot of capability on the offensive end of the floor to score. I like the Maryland trio at 1, 2, 3, Suleiman, Trimble, Layman, and I think they get it done on the road in Sparty and send Michigan State into a continuous free fall that has been kind of the storyline of this college basketball season with them and Duke.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big game for both teams. In Maryland's going into Michigan State. I mean, that's obviously a big game, but this could be a bigger game for Michigan State. They need to get back on track. A win against Maryland would do that. So I guess we will see what happens there. But then another big game this weekend, is a rematch of Purdue and Iowa. Iowa went into Purdue a couple weeks ago, got down about 20 points, and then they came all the way back and behind Jarrett Uthoff and got a huge win on the road at Purdue. They have a rematch this weekend in Iowa City. Who do you got in this one?
It's tough. It's tough, and I know Jared's going to love me for picking Indiana over Northwestern. He's going to hate me for taking Purdue over Iowa. Iowa just beat Purdue a couple weeks ago, and Purdue goes on the road and takes them out. I think they rebound just way too well to lose this game again, and they're the only team in the Big Ten that can pass and distribute the ball better than Iowa can. Like I said, they rebound extremely well. They've got 3 huge guys that can rebound the ball better than most people in the conference and maybe even the country, and they play fantastic defense. And Iowa, as typical Iowa teams in the past, have proven they don't have a lot of dynamic scoring options. Like you said, Jarrett Uthoff is good and he can score. But that's not a lot of firepower. If this is your guy that you're going to boast, Purdue's going to throw your 3 big men at him. They've already beaten them once this year at Purdue. I think Purdue goes back to Iowa, gives them revenge, and plays to their strength, something they didn't really do too well last time around, and they get this win.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be another great game in the Big Ten. I mean, we've just seen all these good games in the Big Ten this year, but I think Iowa, they're playing too good right now. I mean, I know Purdue is going to wants revenge on Iowa after what happened at home, but I just think Iowa's just too good right now. I mean, they're a top 10 team for a reason. I mean, you got Peter Jacques, you got Mike Giselle, you got Jarrett Uthoff. I mean, those 3 right there can score the basketball. Mike Giselle's a great pure point guard for that team. And I think Iowa is just going to be too much. Purdue, they're coming off a huge win on the road at Rutgers, but I mean, that's at Rutgers, and I think Iowa plays Rutgers tonight, so that probably is going to be another blowout. But I just think Iowa's a little bit too much for Purdue. Purdue's going on the road. Iowa's a tough place to play. Iowa's going to get it done.
Yeah, okay. Well, agree to disagree on those two. We've got – good news is one of us is going to get both of them right. Between the 2 of us, we're going to get both those games right. So, but this is where the Big Ten season heats up, is in late January going into early February. This is when the upsets start to happen and the storylines begin to form. Will it be Michigan State realizes they're in a free fall, they pick themselves up and win out? Or will it be another loss and they just continue their free fall and not sure where to go, much like Duke? Is Iowa going to make another miracle run in another sport and immediately anger the entire Big Ten? Who knows? What's going to happen? We'll find out. Now, usually you and I each week are going to have an upset pick. However, we looked at the schedule for the Big Ten in the next week, and we decided that there are no real options unless you like Rutgers over someone, and Rutgers is not going to beat anyone in the entire Big Ten Conference all year. I'll go on record for that. But we did note Michigan and Nebraska is an interesting matchup. Josh, why is this interesting?
This is such an interesting. This is such an interesting matchup because this is kind of like a prove-it game. Nebraska's coming off to win against Michigan State. Michigan beat Maryland last week. They're coming off a tight win against Minnesota. So it's kind of just like prove it to me that you belong in the Big Ten this year. Without Karis LeVert, Michigan's just kind of a middle-of-the-pack team, but maybe if they win this game, they can kind of bolster themselves. Nebraska, they just beat Michigan State. Was that a fluke? Is that just because Michigan State is so down right now? But, this is a prove-it game for both these teams. It's in Lincoln. It's going to be kind of shape kind of how this Big Ten season is for the rest of the season for these two teams, and it's kind of just who wants it more. That's what this game's going to come down to.
I agree with you there, and I'm going to pick Michigan because, like you said, without Karis LeVert, they're very mediocre. They don't have a lot of scoring options, but with Karis LeVert, they're a top half of the Big Ten team. There's no doubt about it. That guy can score, and I'm not comparing him to Kevin Durant, but he's got a Kevin Durant kind of ish style of play where he can create his own shot, he can step back, hit a jumper, he can get to the hoop, and he's very graceful, has a soft touch at the rim and from 20 feet out. And he can change the game just by his presence on the floor. And whether or not he's in this game, I think doesn't really – it matters, but not in terms of who's going to win the game. I'll take Michigan with or without him. We still don't know when he's going to be back. But they've turned it around. They're 14-5, I believe. And people are going to be looking at Nebraska now as that team to turn it around in the Big Ten coming off that impressive road win. But I, who love storylines, like Michigan to come in and destroy that hype in Lincoln, and they take off in the Big Ten. They bring Karis LeVert back next week, and they start winning games, make things interesting going into the Big Ten tournament. So not only do they win this, but I think they continue winning. Why? Because they play good defense. That's a Michigan thing. You know, with Jim Harbaugh on the football field, you got John Beilein on the hardwood. They play good defense and don't have an outstanding offense, but they're well coached. I can see them winning this, go to 15-5, bring LeVert back, and start a nice run through the season and start out going real hot into the Big Ten tournament. It could be very interesting. This game could change their season, and it's just Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, just Nebraska. I mean, when you think of Nebraska, you don't really think of a basketball school. You think of their a Memorial Stadium and their big football games. But I don't know, maybe Nebraska ball's making a comeback. And I mean, they just knocked off Michigan State, and Andrew White, arguably one of their best players, only had 7 points in that game. So that's why I think, with or without Karis LeVert, I think Nebraska is going to pull off another win. They just grind out wins. I feel like they battled with Indiana for a while. Just beating Michigan State's got to bolster their confidence, whether they're good or bad. You just went into Michigan State and got a road win. And now they return home. They got all the confidence. Michigan's they just had to battle through a game with Minnesota the other day. I think Nebraska is going to come out firing, and I think they will knock off the Wolverines at home.
So we can't agree on a single one, but what we can agree on, or what I hope we can agree on, I'll have to ask you about this in a second, is the winner of that Michigan-Nebraska game. Could they go on and make a run into the Big Ten tournament? I'm not saying win the Big Ten in the regular season or make an appearance in the finals, but could they make things interesting, maybe pick up a 5 seed, maybe even a 4 seed in the Big Dance if they keep winning? Because in my opinion, the winner of this game, no matter if it's Michigan or not, even though I predicted Michigan, whoever wins this game, I think this is going to be a start of a turnaround for them in their entire season. So
yeah. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. I was finished. Keep going.
Oh, okay. So I mean, like I said, I mean, this is a prove-it game for both these teams. I don't know if either of these teams have enough to go and get a 4 or 5 seed in the tournament, but I do think they can make some noise in the Big Ten. Definitely finish in the top half. Maybe even creep into a 4 or 5 seed depending on how things shake out. There's just so many teams that have just lost games you wouldn't expect them to, like Michigan State. Maryland's already lost a game, but it's Indiana, Iowa at the top. So these teams are kind of, I wouldn't say like the second tier, but they're kind of like 2.5, 3, kind of in there. So this is kind of a placement game for both these teams. See where they kind of shake out into the Big Ten, and I guess we'll see how it all shakes out. It's such an interesting season in the Big Ten. It's fun to watch for the fan, though, definitely.
Yeah, and in my opinion, there are about 3 teams in the Big Ten, 3 or 4 teams that have an upcoming game in the next week that could make or break the trajectory of their entire season, and 2 of those teams face each other, and those 2 teams are Michigan and Nebraska. So we'll see what happens there. But the Big Ten so far, to say the least, it's been an interesting season. But, you know, there are a bunch of different ways it could possibly go. You got Michigan State. Do they continue falling? Do they pick it up and win the Big Ten, get back to a 2 seed, 1 seed? We don't know. We'll see what happens. But this next week and going forward the next month or 2 is just going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of my first year coming all the way from Seattle. This is my first year, I mean, like being in the Big Ten, actually being in Big Ten country, going to see Big Ten games. I mean, this is a premier conference. I don't know if it's as good as the Big 12 is this year, just because you got Oklahoma, and I'm not going to get into that. But I mean, this is going to be a fun rest of the season. There's so many things that can happen. Indiana could lose a bunch. They still got they got at least definitely the top teams of the Big Ten still on their schedule. They just got to take care of business, bank wins now, and that'll come in clutch when it comes to seeding and when it comes to the Big Ten tournament for sure.
Yeah, they've got to get these wins. Take advantage of the Notre Dame schedule. Get these wins against the more manageable teams. Worry about Maryland, Purdue, Iowa when we get there. We'll see what happens this week. 2 tough matchups defensively. But if Indiana can do anything on the hardwood, it's they can score. And on the football field for what it's worth, but that's for another time. But we'll see if their offense can pull through and get there where they need to be. But it should be a tough one. It'll be 2 full 40-minute battles. on Saturday and Tuesday. So we'll see how it goes, and we'll be back next week to recap for a little bit, and then we'll preview what's up next.
Yeah, so, I mean, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Indiana on Saturday at 12 o'clock Eastern on ESPNU, facing off against Northwestern, and then Tuesday on ESPN, I believe 7 Eastern, also on ESPN. So make sure to tune in to that. We'll have the halftime and the post-game shows coming up after in the middle of each game and at the end of each game. And also, after the Minnesota game on the 30th, Michael and I will have the post-game show. So make sure to tune in that one. Get excited for that. And I think that's all we got tonight. So thanks for tuning in. We'll definitely see you next week. And go Hoosiers.